Hello, everyone. A grain of mustard seed. This is the topic that we're going to be discussing today. My name is Helen, and I'm a volunteer with the Spiritist Society of Melbourne. And what I'm going to present today is my understanding of this topic based on the teachings of the higher spirits that brought to Allan Kardec a collection, a body of knowledge, and I'm going to base on that. I'll show the books in a minute. So before we start, and before I present the books I'm going to be using, I'm going to ask 3 questions, and I'm going to ask everyone to answer in their heads. So the first one is, what is faith? What does that mean? Is there more than one meaning? The other one is, why is it important? Or is it important? And the third question would be, how is it developed? If we know what it is, and then we know that it's important, how will we develop it? Is there a way? So we're going to try to discuss these questions throughout the presentation today. And today's chat conversation is based on changing attitudes. That is dictated by the spirit of Hamed, and it was written by Francisco do Espírito Santo Neto. So besides this book, I also consulted with 2 books. One is the Spirit's book, and the other is the Gospel According to Spiritism. And these 2 books are part of the 5 basic books that was brought to us by the higher spirits, and the information was collected and compiled by Allan Kardec, which is shown on the cover of both books. So, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, which is the Gospel explained by Spiritism, and this book, what the higher spirits do is they explain to Allan Kardec the main teachings of Jesus and the ones that were more controversial in light to their understanding. So the higher spirits said that faith awakens all the noble instincts that leads humans towards the good. And it's the foundation of regeneration. Thus, this foundation must be strong and durable. So they say that faith brings out our best when we have fully developed faith, and we're going to see what that is. And they also say something important, that it's the foundation of regeneration. So what is regeneration? We have a video on that. We have more than one talking about regeneration is our development into a better human being. So what he's saying is that faith is a foundation of regeneration, and that's why it has to be strong and durable. So what exactly is faith? Let's start with the first question. And Hamed brings us that faith is an instinctive feeling that is born with the spirit, an innate belief, an intimate impulse founded on the absolute certainty that the divine power in every situation is always promoting and expanding our personal growth. So here we're not talking about faith in self, because if you look up in the dictionary the word faith is a believing in something. Here we're talking more of a spiritual faith. It's that feeling that there's something bigger and higher than everyone here that is actually caring for us all. And it's instinctive. So let's see the points that the higher spirits, in this case Hamed, brings us. That faith is an instinctive feeling. So we're going to see that it starts as instincts. And in his book, in this chapter, he says that it's very, very primitive when you have the plants that try to face the sun, and with the pets or animals that have that instinct to go back home. So that's, let's say, that's the beginning of what will become faith when we are humans. And it's something that we're born with. Okay. And another important thing that he says in this, and that we're looking at this slide, that in every situation, the divine power is always promoting and expanding our personal growth. So that's what we're going to see. So if you look at the picture, nature is amazing, isn't it, in terms of giving us examples? If you look at the picture, in the middle of an asphalt, you can see that through a little crack, a plant, which seems to be a flower, is coming out. So it's always that certainty that things are going to grow and expand. And he continues, all manifestations of progress, this human intuitive impulse linked to faith is a result of slow and continuous development. So he says that we are not born with, not in our early stages of development. We don't have a fully developed faith. And that is built, like all other manifestations of progress, like love, like respect, like care. We develop that as humans. And it starts even before, like I said. So in the mineral, in the plant, in the animals that don't have reason, they all have a little flavor of faith, which is more instinctive. But as we develop reason, that starts to progress, and that impulse starts to become faith. So like a child, when the child is learning how to speak, the child doesn't open their mouth and start speaking. They start making sounds, and then they start babbling, and then they start forming little syllables, and then bigger syllables, and then sentences, words and sentences, So the same thing happens with faith. We start having faith occasionally, or having a small understanding of faith, what faith might be, but as we progress, that also progresses and develops. So look at what he says. Consequently, and that is what I call, if you look at the picture, that's what I call a leap of faith. Consequently, fully developed faith is not an achievement that suddenly shows up when we want it. It's a result of an effort developed and assimilated over time. We can't expect that faith is going to show up when we are in trouble or when something difficult shows up in our lives. We have to start building that faith within ourselves, or developing that faith in small things in our day-to-day lives, and when we don't actually need faith that much. Because we're going to see further down this discussion that when a difficult situation comes into our lives, it's only through faith that we can actually make sense of what's happening. So you can't imagine that it's going to show up. You're going to have faith, strong faith, when you need it. It's really a matter of learning how to build that faith or develop that faith within us. And the higher spirits, that's what Hamed says, they have that fully developed in them. So to have faith is to listen and notice the real intentions of the divine action in us. And above all, to understand that everything is absolutely right. This can be extremely challenging when we're facing extreme difficulties or tragedy. So that's why what I said, it's so important that we build that trust in the divine power and within ourselves, that everything is absolutely right. And we have to look at, when we see something that's happening to us, we have to listen and notice what is really happening here that I might not be grasping still, that I might not understand at this moment, but if I pay attention, I might get a glimpse of why, what's happening. We're going to see that as well as we progress in this conversation. So nothing is wrong with us, because what we call imperfections in the world are just unlearned lessons that need to be reviewed so we can know ourselves better and the laws that govern our lives. I think that that's important to all of us, because sometimes, I don't know you that's listening, but I have caught myself questioning what's wrong with me. What is wrong with me? And the higher spirit says there's nothing wrong with us. It's just that we haven't learned certain things that we have to learn now, or we went through something. You know how a situation repeats and you say, oh my God, what's wrong with me? This always happens to me. We have to stop and pay attention. And that's what the last slide showed, that we have to see what is it that's really happening. What are the real intentions of the divine for us with all that's happening around us? And when we look at ourselves, we don't have any imperfections as per se. It's more that we haven't learned the lessons that we need to learn to become better people and even to understand the laws that govern our lives. In the Spirit's book, as well as in the other books of the Spiritist philosophy, we will see that we have laws that are divine laws. And even though we might not know them, some of them we kind of have an intuition of how it works, but it's because we're learning. So there are laws that govern the universe, and they are loving laws. And as we develop our faith and our knowledge, and we learn the lessons that we need to learn to develop that, we start understanding the laws that govern our lives. So here's what he says, that there is a reason for everything in the universe. Everything, no exception. And everything that seems tragic or negative in our existence is nothing but life developing paths that will lead us to where our true progress, happiness, and pleasures are. I imagine that many are thinking, yeah, but some things don't seem right. Some things seem really, really wrong. But actually, according to the higher spirits, everything in the universe is right. If we think that God, which in our definition is the primary source of everything that is, everything came out of that primary source. And if that primary source is love and is justice, and it's everything that, all the virtues that we're trying to learn, everything that was created out of that has the same signature, let's put it that way. And if it doesn't, it might be just us. We aren't in the following the laws of nature and the divine laws. And then we feel that something is not correct, like it doesn't feel right. And also remembering that as part of our progress in the beginning, we're learning. So we do make more mistakes in the beginning of any development. For example, a baby will make many mistakes when they're learning and they're growing, which is part of development. And we don't actually criticize them or think that they are worse human beings just because of that. We know that it's part of their development. So the higher spirits have that same loving approach to us, that they know that we are developing. We're not full, let's say, humans in the sense that we're not fully developed. So there is a reason for everything. And it might be that the tragedies are really difficult for us to understand, but it's, if we notice and if we step back and if we look at our entire life, we will see that those moments, those really difficult moments, they actually were leading us towards where our real happiness and development and progress are. And people who have near-death experiences, by the way, there is a Netflix series that talks about near-death experiences. I don't know if you have seen it, but people who experience near-death, so they actually are considered to be dead for a couple of seconds, some minutes, some even longer time. If you watch that documentary, you'll see. They say that some of them can remember them looking at their entire life and linking, that happened because of that. And they even saw sometimes their past lives and they understood why all that happened to them. So if we keep that perspective of eternity, because if we could keep the perspective of one life, it's really difficult to understand certain things that happen to us and in the world. But if we keep the perspective of eternity and that this is only one of our lives, then things change and we can see the links between them. But sometimes even within one life, you can actually look back and understand, oh my God, that was really difficult, but that brought me here, which is something great. And we're going to see a few examples of that. So here are some interpretations of apparently negative facts that are profoundly positive. So the first one is illness. It's when we have a disease. So according to Hamad, he said that in order to overcome a disease, we need to interpret what the symptoms are telling us. And we need to interpret that because they're telling us something about the changes that we must make to balance our psyche or our minds or the way we act, because we know that all our acts and our feelings, they all go through the mind. So the disease, if we look at it in a broader perspective, and now more and more the scientists are discovering this link between the mind and the mentality and attitude and illnesses. So he brings us that if we have a disease, maybe we have to look at the symptoms. What is it telling about me, my lifestyle, the way I think? Because the lifestyle is also dictated by our psyche, like our mind. The next one is repeated events of deception in our lives are silent messages advising that our degree of illusion has gone beyond limits. So if we notice that consistently we're being, like we feel that somebody has deceived us in a way, that might be a silent message that maybe we're not paying attention enough to what's happening around us. And we're expecting more than the person can give us. or the situation can give us. So it's really a matter of adjusting how we understand things. Then he talks about addiction. And he says that an addiction may give us the chance to establish corrective norms so we can learn to express our emotions and feelings. And by addiction, we have another talk as well, because there's another chapter of the book that it talks about addictions. And we know that addiction is much more than drugs, or it can be anything that actually you depend on that. So if you have an emotional or physical dependency on something, that is considered to be an addiction. So what he tells us is that when we detect that we have an addiction, sometimes we don't even know that we have an addiction. For example, a person who is addicted to shopping, they might not know that that's an addiction. Or someone that's addicted to gaming, or gaming on the computer, or even going to games and the casino, for example, betting. So all that, once you detect that that's an addiction, he suggests that we question ourselves. What is it that I have to do with my emotions and feelings that I'm not knowing how to deal with them? So what are the corrective norms that I have to put in place so I can express my emotions and feelings, or go through emotions and feelings in a more resourceful way? Because an addiction is a way to protect yourself from something, or to support you to go through something. And if we discover that, and if we ask this question, which is apparently negative because you detected an addiction, but it will bring you into internalizing and looking inside yourself and identifying, okay, this is because I'm shy, I don't know how to deal with people, so I drink because it makes me more comfortable, but then I can't control that. So you start making that, you start analyzing that and looking at yourself and saying, okay, this is what's happening. What is a more resourceful way for me to do that? He also says other things in the chapter. I'm going to stop here because of time restraint. But always when something happens to us, ask ourselves, what is it that life is telling me here? What is it that's happening to me right now that I might need to pay attention, that might be related to the way I think, the way I live my life? I put these ones because these are really easy to see. For example, a disease is very concrete. Repeated events of deception, of people deceiving us, is also something that it might be that we're either not paying attention to the signs, or we're expecting too much of people. So these are really concrete ones that we can see. But there are more others. For example, loss of a loved one is another thing that he says. So when we lose someone, or even a pet, or a person in our family, or a friend or relative, that teaches us to not be too attached to people, as difficult as it may be. And sometimes that even helps people to kind of think of what happens after death. Because many people live their lives as if they were never going to die. And when you have that happening in your family, or like through an animal that you love, or friends, then you start questioning yourself, I wonder what happens after life, if you haven't had that opportunity to ask that. And that's very important. So that's profoundly positive in the sense that you start connecting with something more spiritual and asking, because this isn't real life. Real life is the spiritual world life. This is small incursions, let's say. I'm going to use this word because I'm going to use it afterwards. Small incursions where we come here to learn and to grow, and mainly learn how to love and respect one another and contribute to the universe, because we're co-creators in the universe. So once we start developing, isn't it? Once we start developing that certainty that everything is all right. So we can start in the smaller things. When something is just frustrating, which is kind of easy to deal with, start practicing there. Because that if it doesn't work out, that's fine. So you start practicing, okay, this, I have to give a step back. There's probably a sequence of events that's happening that will show me something that's going to broaden my understanding and better my being. So I'll pay attention to that. Because Hamed says this, look, those who have learned to observe the sequence of interlinking facts in life not only cooperate with it, but also flow with it. They realize that things which seem negative were just preparation or preparatory means to reaching a greater and more definitive good for themselves. So I put this photo of a person surfing. The person who surfs, they very early on, if they survive, they very early on, they kind of learn how to feel and understand what's happening with the ocean. So if we take that for ourselves in our lives, we can start doing that with our lives, because a good surfer will know when is a good time, when is a good time to surf, when the wave is going to be perfect, when it's not that risky, and they will be able to navigate the challenges because they already paid attention to how things work. So I invite everyone to do that with their lives, to pay attention and see what's happening here. What is the sequence of interlinking facts that brought me to this? And where is it going to take me, more importantly? Because it probably will take you to somewhere better. Probably it will take you to somewhere better. So everything in nature follows rhythms. It's life's processes in action. And at the end of a cycle, our energy starts to decrease so we can gather strength for a new, renewing incursion. So I use that again, that same word. So what happens? If we look at the picture, the sequence, we have spring, and then we have summer, autumn, and then winter. So if you look at winter, we never imagined that after winter, things are going to go all green and fresh again with renewed strength. And that's what he's saying. We have to learn to observe our cycles in life, our rhythms. So it might be that after a certain cycle of learning, we will feel tired and we will feel inadequate. We might feel fear because we don't know what's happening. But after that, just like some animals that lose their shell, for example, and then they're extremely vulnerable for a period of time, but after that, they develop a more efficient kind of protection. And the same thing happens to us during our evolutionary process. So we have to learn to respect those rhythms and cycles. And the spirits, and Kardec asked the spirits, and that's in question 922, earthly happiness is relative to the position of each person. And what might suffice for the happiness of one would be misfortune for another. Is there nevertheless a common standard of happiness for all? Because we know that happiness is relative, isn't it? Well, they answered, for material existence, it's the possession of all that is necessary. And for moral life, it is a good conscience or a clean conscience and faith in the future. So that's how important faith is for our happiness. If we are certain that everything is under control, everything, not our control, but a higher control, then that will bring us serenity. So how is it developed after all we saw? So it's developed through practice. And expanding our consciousness in faith, we experience undescribable inner peace and serenity. because we have perfect understanding that in the universe, everything is in perfect order. Everything is exactly as it should be. There are no delays nor mistakes, only the certainty of divine power ensuring harmony and development of his creatures and creation. Isn't that beautiful? So here we reach an end. I hope you got some value out of this and you were able to think a little bit about how is your faith in regards to such a difficult year that we went through. So for people watching this afterwards, but we're in 2021, and last year was a bit of a challenge for everyone around the planet. So making sense of that and knowing that there is a reason and things are improving despite it looks like it's not. I hope everyone gets a chance to have a think and ponder about how is faith going in your life and maybe improve and develop it even further. Thank you very much.